this Mughal king. His name was Aurangzeb Alamgir. That literally means ornament of the throne and conqueror of the world, which is what I'm going to be calling myself from now because that's incredibly dope. But Aurangzeb was an incredibly successful person. Incredibly. In his reign, the economy of the Mughal state, which was like India at the time, India used to be like this Islamic state, reached further than that of the Qing dynasty. It was the biggest economy in the world. And Aurangzeb himself like doubled or tripled the territory of which his empire covered from his father's peak. It was called Shah Jahan, right? And this guy spent almost his entire life fighting war here and war there, putting down rebellions and uprisings and stuff like that. And he was always very successful. Like, this is the sort of person who never failed at anything he seems to have tried. But at the end of his life, he writes letters to his sons. And what the letters are saying is that one, the state is finished. After me, this thing is all going to ruin. And the second thing that he's saying is, I spent my whole life struggling to please Allah, but I feel like I never got there in the end. In fact, let me read exactly what he wrote so that I don't mess this up. So at the end of his life, he writes, the instant which passed in power has left only sorrow behind it. I have not been the guardian and protector of the empire. My valuable time has been passed vainly. And he was on and on, but you can tell at the end of his life, even though this is one of the most powerful men who like ever lived, and even though like Aurangzeb was boss, like one of the, his dad got sick, right? And they thought, him and his brothers, that his dad actually died, but his brother, a guy called Darashiko, was hiding it from them so he could like take the throne, and then it would be too late for them to do anything about it. Okay, and the way Turkish dynastics played out was that the strongest was the one who ended up being on the throne because he would kill everybody else. So every like succession was a serious war, right? Aurangzeb, even though he was on the back foot, okay, he allies with his brothers. He goes and he defeats Dashiko's army, right? And in one of the battles, I can't remember which battle, you have to realize this is a person who, from the age of 13, was like being put on the battlefield by his father. There was a region of India called the Deccan where there was a lot of fighting, and he was put to be the governor of the Deccan, and his brothers were put in many other places where there wasn't any fighting, like beach and stuff like that. So he was like the most experienced militarily, right? Of course, he had spent a lot of his time in there, and I think he only like climbs to the throne when he's like 40 or something. So that's like 27 years just on the field, right? He goes, and at the start of this battle, right, you'd think that he'd be like with his commanders planning, hey, this is what we're gonna do, right? He gets out of the gate, right, and as the enemies are standing in front of each other, he starts praying. It's like, I'm gonna do that at some point. It's Anyway, he's a really experienced guy. At the end of his life, he's saying that all of his time he has spent in vain, and he has not done the basic things that he was supposed to do. Okay, and if you look at what happens after, because he also says a lot of stuff about how he's worried about his sons and the people after him, and basically he doesn't think that this is going to end well, right? If you look at what happens after, 100 years later, there is no Mughal empire. It completely collapses. One of the last Mughal empires, I believe, he gets invaded by like an Afghan warlord and gets blinded, like the guy takes his eyes. Really brutal stuff. And Aurangzeb could see it coming, but he couldn't really do anything about it. what is the reason for all of this? In the most basic sense, right? The reason for all of this, why the Mughal Empire just disintegrates after him, is because his son, immediately when he becomes Sultan, right, he kills his other brothers, which is normal, that happens, right? And then becomes a Shia, okay? And then quickly after that dies. And the rest of his sons after that, like the rest of his descendants after that, were never truly able to maintain the empire at its former height. Why? Because Aurangzeb had a son who hated him, who just immediately died, right? Not being able to pass on how you rule and stuff like that to his son. And then after that, their power just kept decreasing and decreasing and decreasing because the inherent skill was just decreasing with each level until you end up with the guy who's being blinded by some random Afghani warlord. But in essence, right, the reason why Aurangzeb's matters went awry after he died and for his empire was simply a case of bad parenting. Okay? Because if you look at his relationship with his son, it was really bad. And, maybe he tried his best. I wasn't there, right? But in the end, it came up to a really simple issue. And I see a lot of people talking about goal setting, and it's like, how do I get to my 10K per month? Or all of this stuff, and usually just talk about one specific aspect. But what you need to be thinking about is three things, okay? And this comes from a hadith. Okay, not a hadith. There was this story of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, I think, right? And one of his brothers from Al-Muhajirin. There were these people who went from Mecca to Medina. When people first moved from Mecca to Medina, they came into Medina and they were kind of like refugees, right? So what the Prophet ﷺ did was he would pair a person who is a Muhajiri and a guy who's just come from Mecca as a refugee to somebody who's already established in Medina, which is an Ansari, right? So this Muhajiri, I don't remember the names, don't quote me on the names. I think it was Abdurrahman bin Auf and Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, but I'm not so sure. He comes into this house, right? And this was before hijab. He sees the wife of this guy and she's not taking care of herself, right? And he asks her, what's wrong with her? Why aren't you taking care of herself? And the reason is her husband has completely left off this dunya. He's not interested in dunya, he's just working for his akhirah. And the guy, true to word, was praying tahajjud all night, was fasting during the day, and lots of other things, right? Can't remember. But basically, the Muhajir was not accepting this. When it came time at night for this guy to pray, he'd be like, go and sleep. And the guy would be like, okay, and then he'd wake up again, go and sleep, until the last of the night he allowed him to pray. And the same thing with his fasting. You'll see him fasting, and he's like, eat with me. I'm not going to eat until you eat. And the guy would end up eating, and eventually the guy goes and he complains to the Prophet, this guy is bullying me and making me eat and sleep. God damn him, right? Stuff. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not paraphrasing. He did not say that in any way, sort of form, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, the guy who was preventing him, he says, "Inna li rabbika alayka haqqa, wa inna li nafsika alayka haqqa, wa inna li ahlika alayka haqqa, fa'ati kulla dhi haqqin haqqa." And you have responsibilities to your Lord, you have responsibilities to yourself, and you have responsibilities to your family. So give each responsibility its due right. And so when you're goal setting, this is advice I'm taking myself. Maybe the three people who are going to see this video should also take, right? When you are goal setting, set goals in terms of yourself. This is what you want to achieve. That's your 10K per month. This is your blah 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 blah. Set goals you want to achieve in terms of your family. Yeah? Whatever it is, getting your daughter to wear hijab, your sister to wear hijab, or something of the sort, right? And then goals in terms of your Lord, and these are your religious goals, memorying in Quran, etc, and stuff like that. And if you do this, right, what you end up with is you will not end up with a situation like Aurangzeb and the rest in the end of your life, where you're super developed in one area, and because you're not in a different area, it all just comes crashing down. this will definitely prevent you from like certain pitfalls in terms of your character, right? So basically, have you ever seen a story of like, first of all, in terms of Orlando, a person who's like a super businessman and then his children just fire goes to ashes? Or for example, a man who's like super respected in the community and commits this crime. This allows you to deal with certain flaws in your character before they become big things. And the second thing that you need to do is you need to balance your goals along this kind of like area. So, yes, you could make a lot of money doing this thing, but is it really worth it if it's going to take you away from this responsibility in terms of Allah, okay, or this responsibility in terms of your family? It allows you to balance yourself, right? Not in the sense that you should only work at this time and you should only like rest at this time and stuff like that, but it allows you to balance so that you're not going super forward in one direction to be pulled back from a different side. And yeah, that's the end of my TED talk. Like, subscribe, etc.